Hi, I'm your host, Zach Hale, and this is Play the Ink, a podcast where we discuss the composer performer relationship with living musicians and the way that the composer can change the way the performer performs and the performer change the way the composer composes. Today on the show, we have two guests that currently reside in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and both work at McGill University. The first is Fabrice Mirandola, who is a professor of percussion at McGill. He also is a co-founder of the percussion sextet Sixtrum and the director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Research in Music, Media, and Technology, or known as CERMIT, which is housed at McGill University. Our second guest is Philippe Laroux, who is a composer and a professor of composition at McGill University at the moment. We caught up with them on a Saturday morning over Zoom. And just to note, we did have some connection issues at some points, so you may hear some digital noise or audio dropping. We apologize for that, but we've tried to remove that as much as possible. Enjoy. So I'm kind of interested to talk to you both about your individual selves first, before we start talking about how you guys work together. So I think some of the first questions I want to ask you both is just like kind of how did you get into music and where, what were your inspirations and things like that? So I'll start with Philippe. The first question was like, when did you know you wanted to be a composer and like what kind of started you down that path?
I think when I was 11, I decided to learn guitar. And so I was a very shy guy, but even with that, I go to the conservatory and I attended to a class. And when I came back, I took the guitar of my brother and I composed the piece. And immediately, and so my mother had to learn me how to put the notes on the staff, etc., etc. On the kitchen, I remember that. And then I always composed. And after I was also very interested by mathematics when I was at school. So I guess at 16, 17, I was sure that I wanted to be composer.
So it's interesting. You said that your mother showed you where the notes were. So I'm guessing your mother, were both your parents musicians, or what were their backgrounds?
No, absolutely not. My mother was not a musician. Just she learned the notes at the school when she was very young.
Oh, okay.
And it was enough to teach me.
Just, yeah, every good boy does fine. At least that's the one we do in English. I don't know what you do in French for that, but yeah. Well, very cool. So I guess do you play guitar, I guess is what you say. Do you still play guitar, and is that what you started on and kind of continue to do?
Yes, I played guitar, and 1 year after I started to learn piano and then harmony, etc. And also my brother was a sound recorder on movies. So at home, I was having a Revox, a Nagra, all the tape recorder. So I learned very early to cut the tape and to return the tape. And so after I was also, of course, very interested by electroacoustic music. So I entered the Conservatory of Paris with Pierre Schaeffer. And at the same time, I was going to Olivier Messiaen class, composition, and Claude Balif analysis. So it was very rich. And also something very important, we had at this period some workshops at Radio France for young musicians. And it was incredible because, for example, we were able to use all the percussion setup of Radio France. I don't know if you can imagine, it's incredible. It's a treasure of instruments. We were having broadcasting, so I composed my first piece for my colleagues, also ensemble piece. It was really incredible, very dynamic period.
That's amazing. And for people listening, if they don't know who Pierre Schaeffer is, I mean, he's kind of the godfather of musique concrète, which was, taking sounds and kind of creating, pieces out of them and stuff like that. And did he work at Radio France as well, or I can't remember where he worked historically?
He started to work at Radio France, but after he created the GRM, Groupe de Recherche Musicale, But it was linked to Radio France also at
Still
this
the
period.
same.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, maybe we'll talk more about that later, but we'll go to Fabrice now, former percussionist on this side. So just for everybody to know, there's always a composer and a performer on this show. So yeah, Philippe's our composer and Fabrice will be our performer. So being a percussionist, I guess the first question, was percussion your first instrument, Fabrice?
Yes, it was. And I decided very, very early on that I would be a drummer. I remember when parents were building a new house in the country, they were both like teachers, school teachers. And there was the guy doing the plaster, and he said, like, what do you want to be when you're growing up? And I was 5 years old at the time. And I said, I want to be a batteriste, which is like a drummer, but like kind of saying drummerist. And that came from two things. The first one is my father was an amateur drummer. So we had a drum set at home. And when I was young, when he was like meeting with friends in the weekends, they were still playing together. They met at high school. And they had the band in the high school, and when they were like, meeting each other, they were all school teachers. They were like meeting once in a while, and he was playing drums. So that was one of my inspiration. The other one was a very small djembe-like drum that was, tourist stuff that they brought back from Africa, visiting colleagues of theirs. And I always had this drum sitting in my room, and for some reason, that was an inspiration, and it was something that drew me to Africa since my early childhood, and that's what led me later, to do my PhD in ethnomusicology, working in Central Africa. There was a direct connection here. So as soon as I was old enough to go to the conservatory, the music school in my region, Montluçon, I started we had musicianship classes and stuff, and then I was fascinated by percussion. And as soon as I could put my hands on sticks, I started, and I never stopped.
Cool. Very nice. So yeah, I guess, the other question I had is, when did you choose? So it was like right away. You didn't have any choice, pretty much. Yeah. Cool. Well, very nice. And then after that, just from the history that I know then did you go to study with Delacluse, and was that in Paris?
Yes. So when I did my studies and at the conservatory in a music school in Montluçon in parallel to my studies at school, so secondary school, high school. And then I had the chance to have a fantastic prof. It was a very small city. It was a young prof. He was an excellent pedagogue and very, very open-minded. So we did lots of creation actually so we had a percussion ensemble almost, I think the first year I played percussion, I started to play percussion ensemble music. And I was like, through my whole life, I've been basically playing percussion ensemble music for over 40 years now, because that was the upbringing we had. And then I went to Paris, so I did in parallel musicology at Sorbonne. And then I went to different conservatories within Paris, and I had the chance to work with Didier Benetti, who was fantastic percussionist. It was French National Orchestra, it was a timpani solo. And Frédéric Macarez with the Paris Orchestra, and then with Delacluse at the Conservatory of Paris, where Philippe went for his studies, which is the conservatory, as we call it in France. And then with Delacluse, which is in the world of percussion, was one of the most famous teachers for classical percussion. And so I was among the last students to have him, because he retired shortly after.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, for our listeners that aren't percussionists that don't know, I think everybody plays the 12 Etudes, so the 12 Etudes snare drum book, and that's where everyone knows. That's not the only output that Delacluse did, not at all, but that's what a lot of people are very familiar with. So yeah, a very important name in percussion for sure. So that's interesting too. So you did those in parallel. So it's like the musicology and the studying. You didn't do like study, then do musicology? It was all at the same time, or?
No, it was all in the same time, and I was also teaching, because I got my degrees for teaching in conservatories in France. So it was always three things going in parallel, and always, because in musicology, after a while, for my master's, I started to go towards ethnomusicology. So I had to do field research. So I went to Cameroon, I think 15 or 16 times over period of years, and through my PhD, and then it was always kind of run, do more of one, and then you leave the other one on the side for a while, and then you catch back, and sometimes you have the three running in parallel. And that also is true to those days. I was doing too many things at the same time. Just learn to cope with them better, I think. But yeah, it's just, I'm interested by research, I'm interested by performance, and I love teaching. So instead of choosing, I'm doing the three as best as I can.
Yep. It makes sense. Very nice. All right, so we'll go into the next kind of topic. And so now we've talked about you both individually. So let's talk about you both together. When did you first meet? Was it in France or in Montreal? Because you both are professors now at McGill in Montreal. So when was the first encounter that you all had with each other?
I think it was a meeting by chance when I came for concert in Montreal as part of the festival. I don't remember the name of this festival.
Montreal New Music or Music March?
Yeah, Music March. And we just met in the corridor. Maybe 1 minute we discussed a little bit. And then we met again when I came to teach here. So it was in 2009. First at Université de Montréal, 2 years, and then at McGill.
That's right. You did teach at, UDM first. And Fabrice, when did you start at McGill? So I'm trying to think 2009. So then when did you arrive?
I started in 2005.
Okay.
I knew of Philippe Music before, of course. And there's a kind of a funny thing because I was a student at Conservatoire of Paris. There was Delecluse as a prof and Jean Geoffroy was his assistant. And Jean Geoffroy had worked with Philippe closely. And you had written, Philippe, the piece for Marimba and Vibes for the same player. And I remember seeing Jean practicing or like, what are you doing? You have like the two instruments in front of each other. And he was like, oh, it's killing my back. I shouldn't have said yes to this one. And it's funny because then I taught this piece, I coached a couple of times this piece, and every time I was remembering that. And everyone's like, what should I do? I put the Marimba first, the Vibes second, or what? And I was like kind of a first encounter of Philippe's compositional process through someone else. And then the first time we worked together was around the sextet for percussion, not de la vitesse.
De la vitesse.
De la vitesse. De la vitesse. So off speed, if we can translate in English.
In English, yeah.
Out speed, something like that, which is only for non-tuned percussion instruments. And it's a very large piece, 20-25 minutes, with a little bit of theatrical components towards the end, and some specialization happening. It's very, very challenging. Individually, each part is very hard to play, very difficult. And as a group, putting together is also very challenging. And so we worked hard on that. And I remember the first time Philippe came, and it's the room at University of Montreal was not so large. So we are in a circle around the room, and he's like sitting kind of the seventh point of the circle of the with the six percussionists. And I remember like we started, it's a very, very thin, light roll in the snare drum, the six players on the same snare drum, and it kind of starts as a roll and then becomes a bit of a grain, and you hear more and more the as if you were zooming into the sound. And then it's very interesting. And then we started, it was like, oh, that's way too loud. And we were all like already so, trying so hard to play soft. And we were like, okay, we're in for a ride. But it was fantastic. It was a fantastic experience because like Philippe has a very clear idea of how what he has in his mind as sounds. And he was able to every time explain them very clearly. And as soon as we were able to get the sound, any combination of sound, which is the most interesting to me, the way he's able to imagine different sounds, putting them together, and it sounds exactly how he wants them. So that must be his electroacoustic upbringing somehow. Mm-hmm. But once we are able to do it for everyone, it's like, oh yes, I understand. And it makes sense. And the coherence of the writing is something that's really fascinating and makes it so interesting for us to play. So it is very challenging. The parts are, this piece and the other one he wrote for us, De l'Itération, are some of the hardest pieces we put together, frankly. But really, really fun to play, because you have a horizontal line from the beginning to the end. It's like a continuous process with different sections, and the sonorities are so unusual that it's very, very interesting to work with.
So that's interesting too. It's almost like the sum of the parts is more, than, or whatever it is. It's like when you put everything together, even all these hard parts, it becomes, I guess, something greater. So was that piece, De La Vitesse, was that written for six drum, or was that written beforehand for another percussion sextet?
Yes, the piece was a commission of Les Percussions Strasbourg some years ago. Maybe it's not so long. It's more 19 minutes, but maybe it feels very long.
Well, it's about speed, so I don't know. Maybe you manipulated time.
And the idea of this piece was to work on the notion of to create one sound with 6 components in the sound. So for that, I have chosen to work on the all the military drums, all the formulas, the patterns in military drums, and to superimpose them to create very evolutive textures and to make interpolations from one to the other, etc. So the idea was really to create a sound completely as a sort of synthesis, but not an additive synthesis, more, sort of a granular synthesis or something like that.
So that's interesting. I think we'll skip around here, but so what person would you say kind of influences that type of mindset that you have in composition? Because I have some people that come to mind, but I would want to see what you say. Who influences you to write like that?
First, my background, which was both instrumental and electroacoustic. So, because of course it's also a thinking of this thinking of sound is really coming from the electroacoustic, from the experience of the electroacoustic in studio. When you mix a lot of tracks and you create a new sound. So, but Xenakis was of course here. I don't know.
Stockhausen at all? I don't know. It makes me think of Stockhausen as well.
Not so much.
Okay. More Xenakis, yeah.
Maybe for the structural aspect, and even that I'm not sure. Maybe Kaggle also. Because there is also a very important scenography in this piece, because all the musicians are playing on just one drum at the beginning, and little by little they extend the setup, and at the end they are everywhere, in the wings, in the audience, everywhere. Maybe Griset, but yeah, not so really. But tell me what you think. I'm interested.
Yeah, I was going to say Xenakis, because I know you studied with him, but that kind of granular. I mean, I just think of, even from like the algorithms that he's created, I think they have like Gendy, and it reminds me of that kind of, and you talked about mathematics as well, which is very Xenakis to me, kind of how you have the stochastic kind of thing that will create kind of these textures and things like that. So
yeah, for me, was an incredible composer. He's really somebody who can speak about sound in terms of clouds, of processes. So it was of gas, cinetic of gas, or functions, so it was so refreshing after the Boulez period with 12 notes, etc. So for me it was super important.
So you said you like mathematics. Just talking about that, do you use any kind of like mathematical things, or like Open Music, which is, for our listeners, a program that kind of allows you to do algorithms and more of a UI based thing? But do you use any of those techniques to kind of get that idea, or do you do it all in your head or kind of on paper?
No, I used a lot, but finally not so much in this piece. But in pieces like Voirex or Extended Apocalypse, or a lot of my pieces, I work on Open Music, to create. One of my horse of fight. Fighting maybe is the fact to use the calligraphy as a model for a lot of things, and so to deduce from all the gesture of the calligraphy, all the parameters, the pressure, the strike, the surface drawn. Sorry for my poor English. I use a lot of software like that, for sure.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, for the composers out there listening, you should, if you haven't heard of Open Music, which I had not until I went to Montreal, it is very amazing program. Where was it created? What's the place? At Earcam, yeah. It was created at Earcam. So, and also if you don't know what Earcam is, you should check that out as well. But we won't get into that.
Before it was called Patchwork, and I started with Patchwork in the 90s. And then it became Open Music. Yeah.
Well, cool. So we were just talking about percussion sextet. So we can talk to Fabrice about Sixstrum, because that is the percussion sextet in Montreal that, I don't know, did you found it or co-found it? Did you do it with other people?
I did it with other people.
Okay.
And the first person I met when I set foot in Montreal was Robert Leroux, who was professor at the University of Montreal, famous percussionist in Montreal, had been the dean of the Faculty of Music also at the University of Montreal, which is francophone, and I was working at McGill. Became friends instantly, I would say. It was really, kind of two guys meeting, two percussionists, and it clicked right away. And I had a couple of lunches with Robert through my first year in Montreal, and we were discussing, after a while I was like, I'm very surprised, because when I was 18, I was not even 18, I was 17. The first time I went to Paris on my own to go to register for university and stuff, I went to a big shop with discs and stuff, and I went to the section. They had a percussion section, if you can imagine. At the time, it was huge. It was La Fnac, which was like this kind of huge shop. And then I found a disc from McGill Percussion Ensemble, and I had no idea at the time that 15 years later I would be a prof at McGill.
Yeah,
it was
very cool.
Coincidence. But then I had in my mind, when I came to Montreal, I thought, wow, the music scene is pretty lively, and the percussion with Pierre Belluz was kind of the equivalent of Delecluse for France. Pierre Belluz was one of the prominent player playing the orchestra, having a jazz quintet, and doing all the contemporary music and stuff. And when I came to 2005, all of that was kind of gone or dimmed. There was like not much going around. So after discussing, we were like, Robert, we need to do something. We need to start something. And so the next year we got together, started to think about putting things together. And our first concert was 2007, September. And we played one of the huge pieces in the repertoire, which is Les Pléiades by Xenakis. And I think we rehearsed for 100 hours or something like that, because it's really a monster, and we had never played together, so it takes even more time, just to have the connection all together. But it was a fantastic experience, and so we started, and we've been now, it's our 15th season this year, and I think we're about to 50 commissions and new pieces. And so some of them was to Philippe, and I said, Philippe, we would really like to do another piece from you. Would you mind, writing a piece? And he said, well, my agenda of commissions is over full, but for you, I will make some room. So that was a really, nice phrase. And so he set out to write De l'Itération, which, maybe I will let Philippe explain what it is about. But that was the second piece. And we also worked on the trio by Philippe, a trio that was composed for the Luxembourg competition. And it had many, many instruments. And with Philippe, we decided to try to do a reduced version in terms of instrumentation. So he reworked the piece entirely. It's called Les Uns for us. So the music is is the same, but the instrumentation is reduced, and that's how we ended up recording a CD with De La Vitesse, Les Uns, and Deliteration. So sextet, trio, sextet. So maybe Philippe, you can explain what the Deliteration is about.
But just to say, for Les Uns, it's a reduction of the instrumentation, but not of the music for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's exactly the inverse, finally. The fact to have reduced the instrumentation finally give more strength to the music, I think. Yeah. So Deliteration, it's a piece in a cycle of 3 pieces. De la Texture, which is for 8 instruments, De La Vitesse, and Deliteration. And all are based on the same model of a sort of a big bang, an explosion from a germinal element, and going like, a sort of every particles goes with a specific speed, etc. And there are some meetings, and at the end it becomes a galaxy. It's 3 pieces. The first one was De La Vitesse, which has absolutely no pitch. Second one was De La Texture, who is a sort of De La Vitesse, but almost only with pitches. And the third one was Deliteration, which is a sort of combination of both. Because in Deliteration, you have only pitchy instruments of percussion. So, marimba, vibes, glockenspiel, crotales, etc. So it's only pitchy. So it was interesting for me to go from only noise, of course, noise is a wonderful thing. So noise, go to pitchy and comes back, etc. To have a back and forth between noise and pitch finally, because noise contains pitch and pitch contains noise also. So we know that. So it's super interesting to navigate between them.
That's a good question too. What I was going to ask is, why do you like working with percussion so much? And maybe that's kind of the answer before I ask the question, is because you can have that noise, and I guess other instruments can do that, but I think we're pretty good at it.
There are a lot of reasons, but mainly the two main reasons are the fact, first, that with percussion we have to think completely differently, because you cannot. Well, of course, if you play, chords only for vibes, and you can play again, a Gabriel Fauré romance or something. Mm-hmm. But if you want to be a little bit innovative, you have really to find a new way to compose. You have to find new connections between the elements, which are not based only on pitch. So you have to invent, you have to work more on the notion of energy, of dynamics, of course, timbre, etc. So that's a very important reason. And the second one maybe relates to the first one, but it's the fact that the percussion in a certain way for me is a sort of intermediate medium between instrument and electroacoustic. Specifically because of that, it contains so much noisy components and so much pitchy components also. So it's super interesting. And also, I want to add that the percussionists often, and Fabrice is a beautiful example of that, are so open and so good also technically, and they are always ready to experiment new things, etc. So it's wow, it's not like an orchestra when you come and you see 80 people who think, wow, we have to play this music today.
Right.
Of course, all the orchestra are not like that, but so here it's really a sort of laboratory, incredible. I like that so much.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just played a piece where I had to use toothbrushes because they vibrate and you put them on the vibraphone, and it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess you could ask a violinist to do that, and they probably would, but most of the times, anything like that goes to the percussionist right away. Anything bizarre. So
And also maybe the percussionists don't have a so big repertory in terms of romantic classical music. So of course they are also very open to experiment, to create a new repertory, and this is what they do actually.
yeah, I remember reading a book by Stephen Schick, and he says somewhere in there, it's like, well, you only really have like 120 years worth of history. I guess you could go back to timpani with Beethoven, but I mean, really, that's what we got. And then we only really started doing solo pieces maybe in the 50s or 40s, you know? So it's like, yeah, we're less than 100 years old almost with our, so it's true. It's like, well, we're kind of still defining what percussion means. At least that's my thought. I don't know, Fabrice, do you think that kind of way too? Or did I say something wrong historically?
No, I don't think so. Certainly, the first piece for solo percussion, I think, is in the 50s exactly, and the percussion ensemble pieces, the first one date around the First World War. You have a few pieces, and then you have the big, like one of the first piece that made history really is Varese ionization, or because it was very radical at the time, also the way, and including sirens and sirens, because they don't slice the pitches, in steps. It's like a continuous sound going up and down. And it's interesting because the potential of percussion being as close to electroacoustic music as you can without being electroacoustic. So because of we have so many instruments, so many basically materials. We heat metal, we heat skins, drums, we heat wood, and we can scrape it, we can shake it, we can rub it in so many different ways that the range of timbres, of sounds and textures we can create is almost infinite. And I think that's one of the things that is fascinating a lot, many composers when they write for percussion ensemble, because you can really experience and try things and experiment. In our end, for sixth drum, for example, what we love to do is what we did with Philippe, is to workshop the piece. So for example, when he came with Déliteration, which was a new piece written for us, we had discussed the instrumentation, and then I think we spent 10 hours, 3 rehearsals, reading the piece from beginning to the end, so very slow, But why did it take so long? Because every time we were checking what mallets to use for which section and which instrument. And that's where we discovered that Philippe's way of thinking about hard mallets for us was translating an extremely hard mallet. And so when you have the scale, everything goes better. But it was really interesting because it was really a work together. What Philippe had written on the page was 90 to 95% to 99% exactly what we had to do. So we spent a lot of time setting things and trying them. And as I mentioned before, every time when we were reaching the point that was satisfying to Philippe, it was immediately obvious to all of us that we had reached the point. And then Philippe said, okay, there's a few passages where I want to change a few things. It's like, okay, here we need a bit more time. Here, maybe we can use a bit more this texture or whatever. And then we progressed and we on our side, and a few, I think it was weeks or months later, then we did the real work of preparing the concert. But that was like, and of course, Philippe was there every time. Like not every rehearsals, but every time we were ready to play something and check things with him, we could do that. So it was a very interactive process. And to me, that's why I love contemporary music, because I can work with the composers hand in hand. And I think when you work with the composer, you learn about their way of thinking about music. So the next piece, you're already with them, but then you have points of comparison. So every time you play one more piece from the composer, you go further in the comprehension of the way they have to write. And also you can propose new things that you think will just like prolongate their ideas, go even further, and try things that someone would do differently. But they also belong to my, like in my case, and my way of interpreting music. So I have my approach to percussion, which is very based on phrasing and coherence of sounds, and to me is enjoying it, having fun, and I like things which are rhythmical also. So it's my way of performing, and we go somewhere.
I would like to add that this moment of, for example, in déliteration, the moment to choose all the mallets, etc., is super important, because if we don't do that, the piece is nothing. So maybe the piece is written at 99%, as said Fabrice, but actually, if we don't have this moment, it's like nothing. It's like you have a sculpture, but it's covered by a curtain, so you see nothing. So you have just to remove the curtain, and wow. That's and it is a way also to prepare the tradition, the next tradition, the future tradition of this piece, especially, but this kind of music, because for example, after the piece was performed in Switzerland by just the students of the Conservatoire de Genève, and as they listened to the recording, and they saw the score with all the changes of mallets, etc. And it was it's important for the future also.
That's and that's something I was just thinking about when we were talking about mallets, and I can't think of another instrument maybe that has that issue, that maybe now we're trying to as we grow the history of the instrument, because it's like, okay, so I have a Mike Walter Red, but you might have a, Vic Firth, whaterever model or something like that. But even like I've recently talked to Ayun about, or somebody about Steve Reich stuff, and it was like, oh yeah, well Steve Reich always used these Mallotech blah 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 mallets, and you're like, oh, that's the sound he wants. So it's almost like we're going to have a history of mallets, even, when Mike Bolter is no longer a company. You'll be like, well, historically they played that with Bolter Reds. Well, what's that? Well, they kind of sound, I might have one. Let me go find. Oh, okay. So that's super interesting that, and I don't know, maybe you guys can speak about that more, but it's like, I don't know of any other instrument where it changes the sound of it so much and that we have no reference point. You can say soft, and soft does not give you enough text, context, I think.
I think that the bow of a violinist or cellist is something also super important.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe it doesn't have all these colors we can choose with mallets, but this is a little bit comparable.
Yeah.
I would think that the only instrument I can think of is the organ. Because when you go to from one place to the next, the organ, even though they have the same kind of descriptors, for 18 inches or whatever, it's the sound is different. It's also very acoustically dependent of the room, in the space in which it is, a concert hall or a church, also of the maker. So I think, and I know that organists, every time they go play somewhere, they have to kind of remap, the jeux what they're, timbre they're using. That will probably the closest, but it's true. And we go back to mallets. I write down now all the mallets I'm using every time, but some of them have been made specifically for me. It's a brand, but then I called the guy, and especially when I was in France, and I was like, okay, can I have a bit thicker, a bit heavier, a bit whatever, so that actually the brand with my way, but they're 10 years old, and so the hardness is super specific.
Yeah.
So, and even if you get a brand, it's any production, industrial production, it kind of changes over the years, and especially rubber mallets. And we have that with six drum. We're like, okay, yeah, we have that, and we take the mallets from a box that we have, especially for drumming. We have a set of mallets, and then some of them have aged differently, so they don't have the same hardness that they had before.
Yeah.
So it's a game of constantly replacing. So the fact that we have a very good recording now of Philip's piece, it's kind of, a reference point, because you can go listen and say, okay, so I see what it could be. And then you go around, but that will be alive. And then in 100 years, when Philip will not be longer here, and me neither, people will have to go and do things. So, but the documentation is very interesting. And what is fascinating to me also is that contemporary music becomes an oral tradition. Here we're speaking about music without electronics. And the funny thing is that when you add electronics and live electronics to pieces, the oral component of the transmission of knowledge is even more important somehow. The know-how of what is going on and how things are evolving. And so paradoxically, we have more and more ways to record what we're doing. But I would say the most crucial part of the knowledge is still oral and transmitted from one person to the next. And so that's quite interesting, and that's why this relationship between performer and composer for me is so important to build and to be able to pass to the next generation. And that's why it's important that we have our students playing those pieces, and then they will they'll be in the future they'll be the one creating new ensembles and playing this music again and passing it to the next. I think that's one of the very interesting things to do, and to be the transmitters of knowledge.
That's always, I remember talking to somebody, I forget who it was, but they had known somebody who was around when Xenakis was there and talked about Safa. And it's like the amount of knowledge you get just from talking to that person, being like, oh yeah, well I played it for Xenakis and we talked about the piece. It's like more than anything I could practice or anything like that. So I agree with you that the oral tradition of being like, oh yeah, I played this for the composer and I remember this, is like, it's always going to be important. It's never going to stop being, or interviews, I guess maybe if we can document it in interview, audio clips or something would be great as well. So one thing that I always thought was interesting, or maybe it's not interesting to you all, but you're both obviously from France. And you live in Montreal. Is there any kind of lineage that you all feel from that? Or does it not matter at all? And what I mean is, like, I think there's a rich history of kind of French composers and performers and stuff like that. So like we talked about Varese, or we talk about Boulez or Grisey or any of these people. And I always, for some reason, have this type of like, oh, that's a French type of sound, or that's something, I bet you that's a French composer, or they were, learned from a French composer. So I wonder, like, do you guys feel that, like, you carry on some sort of thing, or is like nation not really a thing you guys care about too much?
Yes, that's a very huge topic. 20 years ago, I would have answered differently, probably. And now I think finally you're right. So there is a North American approach, there is a French approach, there is a German approach, which is quite different from the French one. Yeah, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. So maybe the French approach currently is probably one based, but maybe it's not only France, I guess, but it's based on the idea that the music is a discourse. The music has a discursive logic. So you have sound configurations which have a more important function than some others, which are more secondary. You have a syntagma, you have a syntagmas in English, you have a paradigm. So the music is something like a language. And for example, in Germany, the main stream is more oriented, maybe moment form, so timbra, only timbra. So we follow each microsecond of the timbra, but not they are less looking to create a form, to create a discourse finally. And in North America, often people are more concerned by the fact also to include in the music all what they are listening each day, in the bar, everything. So there is a strong willingness to merge everything and to find a good relationship between all these things. But of course, after it depends of each person, because you have French super American, you are American super French, you have German super French also, etc. So, and French super German.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. So I'm glad I'm not the only one that feels like that. Kind of how you explain, and maybe it's just like this is where that idea germinated from French, but it's not like every French composer does that. But it's like, well, Boulez kind of did the 12-tone thing, and then he kind of got into more things, and that influenced people. So it kind of bubbles out of that, and I don't know, maybe John Cage did certain things, and then that kind of bubbles out, for the next 40 years or something. So. Yeah, it makes sense for sure. I don't know, Fabrice, what do you think?
Well, I think I like the way Philippe explained things, because it's like makes things clear for me as well. I think in terms of percussion, it is really something important. We speak about the Russian school or whatever, for piano, for example, and for percussion the same. I would say the what is behind kind of the global thing in percussion in France derives from what I said at the beginning from Delécluze about the insistence on musicality. So, for example, you were mentioning the 12 Etudes for snare drum, which is, to my great surprise, one of the pieces, number 9, is asked for every single orchestral audition in the world, and especially in North America. You don't have one orchestral audition without this little etude, which is hell on earth to play. But because it's all very interesting, so very challenging technically, but musically extremely interesting. And one thing I kind of there's one thing I could take away from Delécluze was this insistence of what Philippe was mentioning, the discourse. You have a discourse, you have a coherence to run from the beginning to the end, and even though he was not using too much metaphor about language, Jean Geoffroy, who was an assistant, used that a lot, and the idea of the story. You need to make a story of what you do, and you say something, but the saying, you need to say something, you need to tell something, is a metaphor that is used all the time in France in the teaching. And the other aspect is that it's very elite virtuoso based. So when you reach the Conservatory of Paris, you reach the elite. It's a bit less so now, but in our young days, Philippe and myself, it was very much so still. And it was really based on the virtuoso. So you play your technical proficiency has to be impeccable. And you push. And in terms of musicianship also, which is very different in North America in the upbringing, which is way more based generally around the idea of the band, the orchestra, especially for percussion. And then you develop the solo skills. So the approach is different. The way of thinking is also different. And one thing that didn't help us when playing Philippe's music, his reference is, for example, Jean Geoffroy, because I think, Philippe, you're testing stuff with Jean, right? Sometimes he's one of the best percussionists in the world, with the best technique you can even dream of. So the four of us behind, we have to reach this supersonic level of percussion.
These people can be very dangerous, actually.
So, but yeah, to come back to the question of this kind of school, I would say French school of percussion, that there's something about it, about the also sound quality. North America, what I found when I came, the sound, for example, is more in the head. You just like go a bit more like a drummer, actually.
Yeah.
Whereas in France, it was more the contrary, kind of light and bright. So it's a very huge generalization, of course,
sure.
But it feels a bit like that, like this kind of, when you think about French music, and the orchestras at Radio France, when they're playing Ravel, for example, they're playing Debussy, you have a color which is extremely rich, so lots of colors, but a type of lightness and brightness in the sound, which is different from other orchestras in the world. And I think if you think in terms of percussion, we have a bit of that. Lightness, brightness, and one term also that Delecluse used a lot was lace. So what you play, all the little intricate little flam drive, all those little things, he was comparing that to lace. When you're, someone who is like doing some neat work, this idea of lightness, transparency, and subtlety, actually.
It's so funny. I don't know why, but I always forget Ravel and Debussy. I don't know why it is. They're like in their own box in my mind. Like I don't think of them as French or English or anything. For some reason, they're just like this box in my mind of they're just special. But I'm sure, yeah, that has an influence on French music because they are French composers, which I always forget.
So much.
Yeah, the color. I mean, nothing that I could see was like that. It's like, man, it just came out of. It was amazing.
For a composer like me, Debussy was the real revolution of the music, more than Schoenberg.
Yeah,
really more. Because Debussy's music is based on gesture, on texture already, on a harmony which relates to the gestures. So it's no more question of notes in a certain way.
Yeah, that's very true. Things aren't like, I guess you can find like an A, B, A or some sort of form like that, but then some pieces are just like, man, it just seems like they're improvising and then they wrote it down. And it's like, who knows what, and it's like, who cares? It's not an ABA format or if it's not typical ABA, so it's true. Yeah, it's very interesting to think about. I haven't thought about Debussy or Ravel in a kind of way like that in a while. All right. Well, we're getting towards the end. So, we'll start to wrap things up. So talking about all this is a great conversation so far. But kind of just with you working with each other, maybe some of like pretty hard questions, maybe or things to answer. But we'll start with Philippe. What have you learned working with Fabrice? And I think you've already maybe mentioned some of these, but maybe you just give a bullet points.
Yes, I would say exigency, is it correct in English? Exigence, opening, talent, musical talent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, mainly these three things. Enthusiasm. Yeah, and enthusiasm to work together. It's not just okay, I'm a performer, I do what I have to do, and then I leave. It's real adventure. This is what I like.
Yeah.
But mainly the exigence, yes, to go until the end of the things, even if it is tricky sometimes, difficult, and I guess in our work together we really reach a very, very interesting goal.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I would say.
So Fabrice, then your turn. What have you learned from working with Philippe?
Well, thank you, Philippe. I think what Philippe calls exigence, I think in English we could say like demand for quality, but demand like requirement for quality. It's exactly the same that I get from Philippe. Actually, there's, it's okay. We have this kind of thing written on the page, and until you get it really exactly precisely, it's not satisfied, and sometimes you could think, oh, okay, and then when you reach it, as I mentioned several times, you hear why. I understand why, and so I always try my best, when I have something on the page, and before saying, okay, what this composer did, I always try my best to go to the end of what I think, what I understand, and I always try to go beyond the page somehow. I always try to go to understand the thinking behind, the logic behind why this note is there on the score. Because if you understand why it's there, then you might find a solution which is not exactly what is written, but you find a solution that is actually suiting the what the composer was demanding. And so with Philippe, it's what is really interesting is what on the page you don't have to question it. You know that it's there, but it's up to you to go there that far. So that's one thing. The other thing is like I didn't know some sounds we made together were even possible. Like the beginning, if you listen to the beginning of Deliteration, is combining bird calls, bird calls, which are windy, creative, this kind of thing, with dead strokes going down, and it's the combination of all of that creates a sound I've never heard before. In my experience of 40 years of playing percussion and listening to percussion music and contemporary music, and it's so refreshing to discover that we have so many new things to do, and there are ways, and when you open this door of his way of writing, you're like, okay, I just discovered a new planet.
Yeah.
And now I just have to go. And there's, and so that's this kind of thing. And also the trust we have in each other. So when I say from the Philippe, here it's really impossible. Then he's like, okay. And he sits and he reflects for a few moments and he's like, okay, try that. And we try something. If it's good, it changes its score. So the trust of, at some point, what I had in mind is not working. It's very rare, but it happens. He's listening. And for me, the same. He's like, I really need that. So I'm like, okay, I need to find a way to make it happen. And if he needs this particular note or change or color, it's because it has a sense in the discourse, what we were mentioning before.
Right.
And if we take that away, the discourse is not coherent anymore. And it has so many implications that you have to rework the entire section. So, that's what we like. We like working with each other. Unfortunately, he's too busy to write more pieces. He has to work on operas and things like that. It takes a lot of time. But I would play his music every week if I could.
Yeah.
Because it's just very rewarding and fulfilling as a performer, as an experience, and it's very nurturing, I find. For a prof, I'm a teacher, so after a while, sometimes you feel that you don't have any new things to say. And if you go play Philippe's music, you have lots of things to say for a long time, because you go back to so much depth in the sound quality and the coherence of the music and the structure and everything, that it's kind of boosting, recharging you for a very long time.
Yep, I could totally see that. And just as a note, I looked it up. I think exigence, it says demand or extreme requirement. I think it's determination is probably what we're looking for. Determination. I think you guys are both determined. When you're like you said, you're going to get to the end.
And I would say that this notion of confidence each other is so important. It's really the base of a fantastic collaboration.
But the interesting thing is that you don't find it until you try it, right? Because it's not every composer I have a good relation with, and most of the time it is. But that an understanding of this dimension, really feeling that you're on the same page, is not always the case. And you have to do it, and you have to try it, and that's how it goes. And then it's every time new piece, and every time you go deeper in the relationship, the professional relationship, and then of course the friendship. But the professional relationship redevelops over time as well.
Mm-hmm. I think it's trust for sure. I think once you have trust in somebody even on a personal level, then even in a professional level, it kind of bleeds over. And it's would you trust me if I gave you my keys to my car to go move it? Yeah, well, okay, I'm going to trust you to tell me this. I can't play this note kind of thing. You know what I mean? I'm not doing you wrong. So, well, great. Well, I know, Philippe's working on this opera. I mean, I guess the last final question was, what projects do you have upcoming with each other, which I don't think we just said maybe is any, but individually, what's the projects that you each have coming up?
Yeah, the project on which I am working is an opera. So I'm working for two years now on it. and I have still 1 year, 3 years each day, no holidays, nothing. It's sometimes it's a little bit long, but I'm very happy and confident. So it's an opera on a text of Paul Claudel, a French theater writer, and it speaks about two sisters who are jealous one each other, and one takes the leprosy, and finally, so she has to. We don't have time to say everything, but at the end there is a sort of a resurrection of a child. So it's a beautiful thing, very dramatic, very with a lot of passion, a lot of also spirituality. So it's for me it's very good because it has passion, it has drama, it has spirituality. The language of Claudel is fantastic. So I'm super happy to do that. And concerning our project, for the moment, it's some holidays because of we are too busy each other, I guess. But it will come for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah, so we're and on Six from Sand, like and regarding Philips Music, we're trying to put together a tour in hopefully coming year. Based around Deliteration, which is his piece, and because when he wrote this piece, we had also student composer, young composers that were writing for the same setup. Because of course, for percussionists, if you play a piece and then you play another one, it's a totally different set of instruments. It's kind of a nightmare of logistics. So we had this idea of taking Philips' piece as a centerpiece, masterpiece, and then have students and work with him. And one of them is Nina Young, who is now a very established composer in the States. And Nina wrote a fantastic piece, which is called Etched in Sand, with exactly the same instruments, and they go extremely well together. And then we have now 2 or 3 other pieces around keyboards instruments, or marimba, xylophone, vibraphone, etc. And then we would like to tour this music. So it would be an occasion to dig into Philips' piece again and have the occasion to play, because the more you play, the more you know it, you kind of go in very small nuances in it and things like that. So that's for that. Personally, I still have in mind to do the orchestration of which would become Apapap, as we discussed, with small piece for percussion, because I have the sketch and I have a little bit of sabbatical time next winter, so I will try to preserve some of my time to actually achieve that thing that have been in my mind for I think 4 or 5 years now. So I would like to finish it, and maybe it could be part of this little tour if we can put it together. So it'll be for 6 percussion. So yeah, no promises, but I'm trying that. And then for 6 drum, the next concert is with the Gamelan, so from Toronto, Evergreen Club, Contemporary Gamelan, and it's a gamelan dedicated to contemporary music, actually. And some of their first pieces 30 years ago were with Cage and people alike, and then they did lots and lots of new music, and we are putting together 4 new works. We did 4 commissions for the 2 ensemble together, so it's 14 percussionists mainly, because the gamelan is not only percussion but mostly percussion. It's a bronze gamelan, and it will be fantastic. And it's in 5 or 6 weeks, so we need to get to work. And then we have, at the end of the year, it's a 100th anniversary of Xenakis, so we are putting a Xenakis concert, going back to our very first concert, those Pléiades. So at the end of our 15th season, we are book ending that kind of little historical path for us, and see where we are.
Awesome. That sounds great. So many good things in there. Well, you got to make it down. We're based out of Tampa, Florida, so maybe we can get you all the way down here. We'll see. I would love it.
That would be really fun.
You ever came to USF? Yeah, you haven't been to USF yet in Tampa, so I mean, that would be amazing. I actually know the current professor there as well, so yep. Maybe we'll check on that. Let's get that to work.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, thank you two very much. I think that's where we'll end it today. I had a lot of fun talking to you about, percussion and composition and history and culture and all that kind of stuff. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Play the Ink. Stay tuned for our next episode, which will feature violinist and composer Mari Kimura and percussionist Ayun Huang. Thanks for listening.